encourage you to ask questions and make comments. That way, I hope we are going to be able to focus better. But I'm going to be making my presentations, the first and second. You can ask questions while I'm speaking, in case you don't understand what I'm saying, or in case you find that there is a comment or a question which you simply cannot resist asking immediately. But for most questions, I would suggest that we wait for the question answer session to reach, and then we talk about it. I'm not claiming that there's going to be a mighty brilliant flow in what I will say, but I think it helps that when a presentation is being made, it is allowed to go through its length for it to make some sense. So let's start with our first of the 4 sessions. The first session is the positive mention of intellect in Islam. I would mention a few passages of the Quran which are very clearly suggesting to the reader that if you are to understand God's religion and follow it, it has to be done on the basis of your intellect. But before I do that, I propose that we have an understanding, we agree what exactly are we talking about, what exactly is intellect. So, a common dictionary explanation of this expression is that it refers to the ability of the human mind to come to correct conclusions about what is true or real and how to solve problems. So, within humans there is this ability that enables us to come to the understanding as to what is true, what is correct, and what exactly should we do. But how does it happen? Our intellect, it includes acknowledging realities. We are living in a world and we are surrounded by truths, realities, and we acknowledge it. We categorize those realities. We analyze them. Some people might say that categorizing and analyzing are both probably the same process. I would not greatly disagree, but I have purposely put them in different heads. And then we conclude through what we have done. And this is all the function of intellect. What you see around yourself, you register it, you acknowledge, or you are more consciously aware that there is something that you've spotted. And then you put it into one of the categories that you have in your mind. You analyze what you have seen, and then you draw conclusions. That is how our intellect works, and this process goes on hopefully for every human, every day, many times. To give an example, very frequently repeated example is the example of a person walking somewhere close to a forest, and he notices smoke coming out. Man observes it, it's there. So he is acknowledging smoke, it's there. He notices it, but at times you see things but you don't notice them. But then when you are an intellectually alert person and your intellect is working, the first thing that you do is that you acknowledge and see that there is something happening. And then you decide as to what is the nature of that reality of smoke. And you say to yourself, your intellect decides that it's a thick smoke. So you give a category to it. You put down in a box of And then you figure out that it's a forest, and therefore the chances that it's coming, billowing out of the chimney of a plant, a factory, is removed. It's not possible. So what you're doing is you're analyzing. You're saying that no, that's not possible. I'm not traveling close to an industrial area. It's a forest, and therefore it's very unlikely that it could be the result of some factory functioning and smoke billowing. And then, when all this is done, you conclude, and the intellect concludes that it's therefore fire, which has, the forest, the jungle is called fire in some part of it, and it's therefore that this thick smoke can be seen from a distance. In our lives, we come across many realities. There are many phenomena that we observe. Many things happen between humans, and we see things happening around us in the nature. And there is something inside us which causes us to go through this process, and thus come to conclusions. We draw conclusions on the basis of what we observe, on the basis of the information that we have, and then there is this analysis going on, and the end result are certain things that we consider as our views, as our beliefs, our understanding. D.
So in the definition, you mentioned the word right. The person actually understand the difference between correct and horizontal. Why we ask to use the word correct? Because I thought conclusion that if intellect is telling him whether what is right or wrong, can be incorrect from the other end.
Okay. When I use that word, what I meant was that the person who is going through this process is actually giving a verdict for himself. And I quite agree with you that it's something which is subject to change. It can be relative. But obviously for me, when I'm going to come to a conclusion, I will have to go through this process. And if I'm doing it properly, for the time being, so long as I do not come across anything different which is more convincing, that conclusion will be hopefully correct as well.
My question is quite linked with this, but if the conclusion could be wrong, then we can call it as a perception, or how can we differentiate?
If the conclusion you later realize is wrong, your realization is again going to be based on your intellectual reasoning, the same process. And the other conclusion that you are now accepting, acknowledging as right, would again go through the same process. So when you say that it's wrong, there is something wrong in any one of these 4 steps. Either you have not properly observed, perceived something, or your category was incorrect, or your analysis was not sound, or everything was okay, but you did not conclude properly. So it could be one of those things. And whether you accept a reality as one thing or you reject it, it's always through this process. Well, it's hopefully always through this process. And we will see later that the Quran urges us that we follow this process. So that's what I mean by intellect when I use this word, and this is the understanding that I'm going to employ when we talk about intellect in Islam. Now, you see, there is information which our intellect utilizes for the purpose of going through the process that's going on somewhere inside us. Many people say here in our head. I don't know where it's placed, where it's located, but that's the process which is going on. And the information that we have with us which is used for the purpose of going through the process is either the one that we perceive through our five senses, or the one somebody else perceived through his, her five senses. In the existing world, somebody who's our contemporary or in the past and has therefore given to us through history books or other literature. But it's our sense perception, it's our senses of viewing, watching, hearing, smelling, touching, tasting that enables us to have information, which is the database, and one important category of information that we have with us, which is normally used. And there is another category of information that's already there in the database, which is the knowledge, understanding that we have a priori, that we are born with. So these are the two types of information that we have. They are scattered across either inside us or in the outside world, and then they go through the process that I mentioned to reach conclusions. When we read the Quran, we find an interesting mention which at times puzzles us. Normally, we use the word mind, intellect, intelligence to express the understanding of a person or our own being going through the process that I mentioned. And we use the word heart to mean that part of our personality which has to do with inspiration, motivation, which has emotions involved in the process. However, there is this word heart used by the Quran, and I mentioned what is the difference between qalb, heart and aql. Normally heart is associated with emotions and mind with intellectualizing. But the Quran has used it in some passages in a way as if it's the same as intellect. So, for example, in Surah Araf, the 7th chapter of the Quran, verse 179 says, they have hearts, lahum qulubun la yafqahuna biha, with which they don't think, they don't intellectualize. So, it really means that the word qalb or qulub, which is the plural of qalb, is being used by the Quran to mean a part of our personality which is to be employed for the purpose of understanding and intellectualizing the way we normally understand the intellect or the mind functions. Now, obviously the question is why? Why is it that the Quran is talking about heart in a manner, in a sense, that is normally associated with intellect? The answer to this is that it seems that the Quran uses the word qalb as a superset within which you have both emotions as well as your mind, your thinking process, which is what I'm calling intellect. So the Quran is requiring the reader to make sure that on the one hand he is analyzing, he's concluding, he is using his intellect, but on the other hand he is also giving full attention or employing properly his emotions as well. In other words, the word qalb is a word which includes both our intellect as well as our emotions. When the Quran uses this word and mentions the fact that it's not being properly employed, properly utilized. Why is it so? I think the Quran is actually pointing at the fact that it's not a good idea that you use your ability to intellectualize alone without giving any significance, without involving your emotions. So that part of your personality which gets motivated, which is inspired, which is influenced, which is associated with the emotions, has got to get involved in the process of thinking, of analyzing, of concluding. Or else, if you are just using your mind and detaching yourself from your emotions, then what you're doing is not what is desirable, not what the Almighty expects from you. He has given us a personality which is comprised of both. We think, we analyze, we conclude, but we also have affiliations. We are also interested. We love, and at times things that we don't like, we hate, we dislike. And how is it possible that while as humans we think, and we are doing this very important task of understanding, we are detaching this activity from an important part of our personality, which is emotions, which is our heart. So the Quran is actually condemning, criticizing the attitude of some people about whom it says, لَهُمْ قُلُوبٌ لَا يَفْقَهُونَ بِهَا. They have hearts with which they are not thinking, they are not intellectualizing. So it's an interesting departure from the common understanding that we come across, and this word has been employed, which really includes both. Now, intellect and emotions, they are both a part of us, and we both handle them. Probably they handle us because they both influence us, and quite often it so happens that it is either one or the other which dominates the other. So you need to know what the proper sequence of it should be. In other words, which of the two should come first? Which should take precedence over the other? What we understand from the Quran is that it should primarily be our intellect which should be given the privilege of taking decisions without getting influenced by emotions, which can mar the process of intellectualizing, which can take you away from going through the process objectively. And once we have decided, once we have concluded through our intellect that a certain reality is truth, it's thereafter that we are expected to then allow our emotions to play their role, or the emotions to decide that this is a good thing, this conclusion is desirable, we love it, and we would like to pursue it, we would like to do what the intellect has concluded. So both intellect, both the process of analyzing, concluding, as well as emotions are important, but they've got to be employed in the right sequence. And the important thing is that they are indeed in our control. They are serving us. It's another matter that quite often the other ones which normally have the better of us, they overpower us, and we are not able to do what is expected from us. We've got to acknowledge, we've got to realize that it is the intellect that has to first play its role in ensuring that the things that are not clear, that the conclusions that are not as yet fully drawn, have got to be drawn properly through requiring the process to take place in an objective manner, uninfluenced by any of the outside circumstances. And once a conclusion is drawn, then the requirements, expectations of the conclusion are then fully pursued through the force of emotions. If this sequence is not properly followed, which is quite often the case, then what will happen is that you will already be attached to a conclusion, emotionally attached to it. And because you will be emotionally attached to it, your emotions would not allow your intellect to play its proper role in finding out what the reality is, in categorizing that reality, in analyzing the truth or the data, and in concluding. So, if that is the case, then obviously the process is not going to be followed properly. And the end result is going to be that what we will conclude or what we will pursue will not be correct, will not be truth, will not be what God is going to accept from us. Because emotional attachments are not a reason for something to be correct. It's the intellectual reasoning that enables a person to rationally, justifiably believe that what he has concluded is correct, and then emotion should play their role.
So is that the danger of approaching the Quran at the same time takes?
Yeah, that's true. Absolutely. That's what I try to caution and warn against, because it's happening everywhere. No matter whether it's religion, whether it's our relations with each other, whether it's politics, whether it's sports, no matter what. Whenever we are in the business of knowing the truth, we have got to approach it through our intellectual reasoning. We are expected to do only to the extent our capacity allows. If I'm not a very intelligent person, which is what I am, that I'm not, I will not be expected to draw conclusions which an extremely intelligent person would draw. But having done what I could do, as best as I could, if I've drawn conclusions, those conclusions are the truth for me. Because I have utilized the capacity, the ability that was of functioning, utilizing my ability to analyze that God gave me. And the result that I have come across is the result that He wants me to acknowledge and forget about what is the absolute truth. Because that is something which you would never know. It is probably only on the day of judgment that the Almighty, when He Himself is going to give His verdict, that we would know that, oh, that's what the truth was. Or at times when prophets come and they, because of what they have received from God, they give their verdict from the Almighty. But generally speaking, honestly, I mean, you and I, we are expected to do nothing except for the fact that we go through the process of intellectualizing. And once having done that, we allow the flow of our emotions to be unleashed, to be best employed for the task of the conclusions drawn by the intellect to be fully employed, to be fully realized. Now, the last thing before we discuss what I have mentioned here is that it is not an easy task. The battle, the rivalry between mind and heart, intellectualizing and the emotional, force that we all have inside us, is what causes us to be different from each other. We always are expected to make sure that we are balancing them both properly and in a manner that we are doing justice. And at the end of the day, it's this process which is what we are accountable to the Almighty for. And when we come to a certain conclusion and we are emotionally attached to that conclusion, it so happens in many cases that even though our ability to understand is far greater, but we stick to our guns and we say that this is the conclusion that we've already drawn. We drew it some 25 years ago. Don't expect that we're going to change our views now. Forget that. Once concluded is the conclusion that we have drawn forever. And that is exactly what we are expected not to do. So reviewing what we have understood over and over again is a process that we are expected to do. I just mentioned here, I'm sure that many of us are very fond of our poet of the East, Iqbal, who said so many things about intellect and emotions and intellect and qalb. Very roughly, I will try to translate one famous couplet of his. Aql go aasna se dur nahi, iski qismat pe kar huzur nahi. As intellect, though, is not very far from the target, the ultimate. It is not in its destiny to reach the ultimate on its own. Dile bina bikar khuda se talab, aankh ka noor, dil ka noor nahi. So you ask something more from God, a heart which is sensitive, because this light of your eyes is not the light of your heart. I'm sure that the circumstances in which Iqbal was inviting the attention of people, Muslims of the subcontinent, were the ones where he thought he saw people not particularly inclined towards action. So they were not motivated. They were depressed. They were emotionally disheartened. They didn't have confidence in themselves. So in order to lift them, their spirits, he came with this immensely effective poetry. And obviously the emphasis was on heart, on emotions, which has caused many people to believe that what he was saying was that intellect is pretty much misleading. It's by and large rubbish. So better focus your attention on your heart, your emotions, which I'm sure is not the case if you look at it, the entire stuff of presentations that he's made. Also, particularly his book, Reconstruction of Religious Thought in Islam. But obviously my subject right now is not to explain what Iqbal says. What I'm saying is that the discussion that we have begun regarding Islam is that what is the role of intellect in Islam, in understanding Islam and in practicing Islam. And what I have tried to do up until now in this first session, the first part of the first session is that I've tried to explain as to what, in my view, is intellect and how does it function, and what is the difference between intellect and emotions. And I have introduced to you the idea that the Quran has used an expression wherein it embraces both to be included. And therefore what we get is an understanding that humans cannot divorce one from the other. They are both together a reality, and they have both got to be utilized together in a way that the approach is balanced. But at the end I have given my understanding that going through the Quran, you get the idea that the Almighty would want us to make use of our intellect first and foremost. Whenever there is an important reality which is drawing its attention, drawing us towards it, and is trying to emphasize that it indeed is a reality, we've got to make sure that we detach ourselves from our emotional attachments, our biases, prejudices, and then give the luxury facility to our intellect to be utilized objectively and to come to the conclusions, no matter whatever they are. And once the conclusions are drawn, then again you put on the tap of your emotions to be used again. So emotions have to follow the intellect and not the other way around. Right?
So, please correct me if I'm wrong. I'm understanding that you're saying that something comes from the heart, which could be emotional, and then there's the intellect. And precedence will be, the intellect will have precedence because you have to make a decision. While my other understanding was, through I was listening to the result, that anything which comes into your mind is actually from intellect. If you got to make a decision, this is between the two intellects you are making. And you have to do things through your heart. Because we are considering here emotional things as a maybe for fruitfulness, but emotion can be negative emotion. So it's not actually, I thought, a decision between the intellect or the heart. It's actually the two things which comes into your mind. Emotions can be negative or positive. So the fight between in your mind will make a decision rather than a fight between the heart or the brain.
I will tell you again what I'm saying. I didn't say what you said, that it's prompted by the heart. In the intellectual process is prompted by what you see, what you come across, what hits you, what puzzles you, and so on. While you go through this process, you can be hampered. The process can be stopped, hampered, influenced by your emotions. You say they could be negative or positive. What it means is, by negative, what it means is that even though the intellect has not done its task properly, there are certain things that the emotions are already following, and therefore they are interested in them. And the danger is that because the intellectual process might come to a conclusion which is different from what the emotions are following right now, the emotions try to preempt the process and stop it. So, what I'm saying is no different. That there is a tussle, there is a big, rivalry which is there within all humans between heart and mind, between intellect and emotions. But the Quran at times mentions the two together in a manner that it seems that the Almighty expects good humans to make sure that while they are employing their intellect, their emotions should also accompany it. And there should not be any dichotomy, which obviously is something difficult to sometimes arrange to make sure. But that's what the idea is.
That's why it's being created in the biotics. It's still asking you to think.
Yeah.
Rather than
لَهُمْ قُلُوبٌ لَا يَفْقَهُونَ بِهَا. They have hearts with which they do not think, they do not reflect. So it's beautiful.
One thing, we started from the senses, and then we go conclude, and we use the word conclude as well. Senses is also a very good term for everyone. I have different kinds of senses. Smell senses, my emotions, together with them. So according to my own senses, I draw a conclusion from myself, and that's my good. And the second thing, so there's no need to impose your conclusion to other people because their senses are different. If I believe certain thing of Quran, Chinese, whatever, then I have no right to give other people my intellect to you and give the conclusion, oh, this is right, now you have to follow this one, don't use your emotion. And second thing, clue, there's a new research in science, clue also have a mind. Keep your signal. Within 10 seconds to leave your brain. And then your brain works like your lower. So that's why there's lots of things going on. And the eye is rushing, doing research. There's lots of dialogue. And also, we actually confused over here our students. Oh, emotion is just coming from heart. Actually, emotion is just like we use the Jabila for that. person look at and they will respond, and that's their emotions. So emotions completely, in my view, is not complete 100%, but with the most dominant factor of your physical bodies. But it's anything to do with the electromagnetic, the heart.
Right.
That's what
There are two things you mentioned. You see, you're absolutely right. Your perception could be different from mine. I have no right to impose the conclusion that I have drawn on you. But the fact of the matter is that if you have a different conclusion from mine, and you come to me telling me that, look here, your understanding is not correct. Now, if I react to that by saying that you've got no business to come today, this response of mine is not going to be good, acceptable. Because then I am being rude, and maybe that rudeness is coming from my arrogance. And maybe I don't want the other conclusion to be accepted. That is what I'm calling the challenge, the battle. That all this while there is this tussle between our mind or heart or our intellect and our emotions, what is at stake is the truth, is our sense of justice, is our morality. We always have got to make sure that while we are taking decisions as to whether to go for one conclusion or the other, and obviously the emotions are doing their task, there is something within us that, if properly respected, is going to enable us to know that certain courses of action, certain directions, certain conclusions are correct, and there are others that are not. That is what the Quran again points out. Obviously, Abu Jahl and Abu Lahab had their own point of view, and they used to very strongly express it. Pharaoh would continue to say that, we have our own religion. But the one who knows everything, who can pierce through the hearts of humans, is telling us that even though what they're saying is a very confident statement apparently, but it is absolutely wrong. And I am telling you that they know what the truth is, and yet they don't want the truth to be pushed into them. So I agree with you that, and this is quite often, it happens in our cases in religious circles. And one of the problems that I point out to religious people is that, what happens is that they read the Quran, and you know what the Quran is? The Quran is actually the statement of the Almighty. The Almighty makes his statements as confidently as God should. And the reader of the Quran, after having read it, goes out and says that, this is what you got. At the same level of confidence he makes a statement as the Almighty does. Obviously, we as humans should realize that what we have read right now is the text where the Almighty, our Creator, has expressed himself, who knows what is hidden in the hearts of others. I have no business of making a statement likewise about somebody else, which the Almighty has made about the disbelievers of Mecca. So that is one dilemma. That is one of the many things that actually needs to be emphasized and people should be made aware of. The other thing, obviously, is what you mentioned is, I honestly know very little about it, what you mentioned, and I thank you for giving me an insight into what is happening in the latest investigations. But then what you mentioned is actually a more detailed, refined, and a recent understanding of how the emotions and heart functions, which is great. I mean, the more we know about it, the more we will be better in a position to appreciate and realize that this challenge, this trial that the Almighty has let us get into, is something which, when explored in more details, has certain finer points, which, if realized and appreciated, who knows, we probably would be in a far better position to explain the Quran and its expression in its terms than we are doing right now. Because as I admitted, that it normally is something which you come across as a surprise, that the expression heart that you associate with it, we associate with emotions, is something that has actually has been used in the Quran most clearly for the purpose of thinking, reflecting, and intellectualizing. Please.
When we talk about emotions, are they actually not originated from the mind? Do they really have anything to do with the heart? I mean, heart itself is just an organ which has its function of pumping the blood. What does heart really have to do with emotions? Are they not originated from the mind actually?
I think again, obviously, again, the Quran, when it uses the expression yaqilun, yatafakkarun, etc., or aql, it is not necessarily saying your brain, the part of your physical self that resides in your head. It is actually pointing at that part of our personality which goes through the intellectual process that I tried to mention. Where we are observing, we are categorizing, we are analyzing, and we are concluding. Whether it's happening physically from knees, ankles, or the head, the Quran is not keen to mention about it. Likewise is the case with heart. It's not the pumping machine of our blood that the Quran is talking about. It's talking about that part of our invisible, non-physical self, which is the origin of our emotions. So, wherever it resides. So, I think, at times when we are talking about heart and mind from the point of view of their physical sources, probably we are wrong. We're just talking about the fact that these are two realities and they originate from somewhere inside us. So,
I agree what you're saying, especially for today's the issues with understanding the Quran. But one thing which I feel like, if you're trying to make it very scientific process to reach the destination, and you're limiting it to the human capabilities only. Okay. When we read the Quran, we understand, if I'm not wrong, that Quran says basically that read the Quran, ask the guidance from where I will give you guidance. So there is a third element also required other than your own mind, intellect, and your heart, which is required to understand the Quran properly. And that's the probably reason that there are many, scholars, economists, basically the scientists, they have been reading the Quran, but they don't reach the same destination where the Quran wants to reach there. On the other hand, you look at the very young man, even sometimes, like probably the example of the Sufis, they have reached that without having that mental capability. They don't think there is a requirement of, session between, your mentally possible and intellect and also something else.
For one thing, it's just the beginning of a discussion on this subject. So I'm just trying to introduce the topic, because the topic is intellect and Islam. Islam, we all have a feeling we know something about it. But I'm just trying to tell you the understanding of this expression intellect, which I am sure many people would mean by different things. I am giving in the prelude an understanding of what I am understanding of I believe in, so that while discussing in the subsequent sessions, I can refer to this definition. And I quite agree with you that it's not enough. And probably in the second half of this present session, there is something that I'll mention, which is going to confirm what you're saying. That it's not necessary that if you are an exceptionally intelligent person, that you will also get guided as well. Now, why is that is again a good question, and hopefully we'll talk about it.
The two separate questions are not related to each other. Talk about search for truth, justice, and everything. Do you not agree that? Because we talk about the
It's not that I have no problems. You're absolutely right. And our Creator acknowledges this problem. But then, being our Creator and one who is guiding us, He's also saying that, as if in answer to your question, you are right, but only to some extent. On the one hand, I am emotionally attached to many things which my parents did and believed in. Simultaneously, I also feel that some of the things that they did were wrong. And this is true for everyone. Now, that is where the challenge comes in. My father believed in a few things very strongly, and he rejected a few others, equally strongly. Is it a part of my expectations from him as a human being, moral being, that even if a truth completely different from what my father was believing in has come to knock at my doors, I would say, no, sorry, I owe it to my father. That is what the Quran is saying, you don't. The plea of many of those captains who were invited by the Quran to believe in the message of the Almighty, that they were already attached to their ancestors' beliefs, was completely rejected by them. So what I'm saying is that you're right. We are constrained by the attachment that we have to the beliefs, to the culture, to the values of our region, our ancestors. But then we also have this ability to discern what is right from what is wrong. And you mentioned that it requires somebody extraordinarily bold to come out of that cage. For your comfort and for mine, for everybody else's, the Almighty tells us that although He is going to judge you on the basis of your beliefs and your actions, and that is what is going to decide what your fate is going to be hereafter, He also clarifies in the same verse statement that this expectation is exactly in accordance with your capacity. So, how much does He expect you and everybody else to believe? And how much does He expect us to do good deeds as much as is possible? La nukallifu nafsan illa wus'aha. And what is that capacity of mind? Only God knows. And He is the best judge. That is why I find it so strange that there are religious people who are very fond of giving verdicts that a certain group of people are destined for heaven. What do you mean? I mean, who are you? Sir, this is none of your business. I mean, you yourself are going to be held accountable for what your performance was on the basis of what your capacity was. And it's only God who will decide whether our performance, given our capacity, was good enough or not. So, we are all going through this challenge. And obviously, had this challenge not been there, it wouldn't have been a test. So, we have been tested for it, and be rest assured, the result is going to be exactly in accordance with the strictest rules of justice, accompanied by His mercy and kindness.
So this follows on to my other question. If God wants us to follow a certain path, and we're on track, then also it's written that God controls everything. You must have been asked this question many times, that God controls everything about us. Surely, it's a little bit of a contradiction because God controls us, so if God wanted us to, He would take us there. So in a way, it's sort of a push-pull situation. When we reach a situation and say, okay, God's working here. This is nothing.
When you are into teaching profession, you have some tricks with you, so that if there are particularly tough questions asked, you employ them and get it out. So one of the So, hold your horses and hopefully. If there are no other questions, that is exactly how it was planned. So, even if somebody raises his hand, I'm not going to look at it. So, I hope there aren't any other questions, but if they are, you're most welcome. Because now I'm moving on to the next part of my presentation. And obviously, even if you have some questions, you can ask at the end of this second presentation. Now, I am going to mention some of the many verses that the Almighty, in which the Almighty has emphasized that intellect has to be employed for you to reach the truth, to understand His message, to know what He is expecting. One of these passages is the one which is right somewhere at the beginning of the Quran, where the Almighty informs us that when He decided to send man to this world for the purpose of trial, He informed the angels about his master plan. Recall the time when your Lord informed the angels, I have decided to send to the world an independent being. Khalifa is translated differently. Vicegerent is, I don't know why this word is ever used, nobody knows what its meanings are. But, it's somebody who was to have independence, freedom, call it king, call it sovereign, call it vicegerent, whatever. God disclosed, declared His plan. Angels, we have been informed in the Quran, are the most obedient of the creatures of the Almighty. And one would expect from them that they would always say, Sir, your command. Go ahead. You will not find us lagging, and so on. And you would expect that response more significantly when the Almighty is disclosing, declaring an extremely important, one of the most important projects for a very long time, creation of man. And lo and behold, contrary to your expectations, the angels are asking a very serious question, a question loaded with reservations. They said, are you creating someone who is going to create mischief on it and shed the blood of each other? So, that was the response. God Almighty, in response to this question or criticism, said, Inni a'lamu ma la ta'lamun, I know what you don't know. The reason I have pointed this passage out is that, if we were expected as good religious people to just be obedient and to listen to what has been said, has been given to us as His instructions, then this response of angels, even if it was there, was not a great idea to have been included in the Quran right at the beginning, because it obviously is urging me also to behave likewise. I mean, the Quran, let's face it, it's a book of guidance meant to guide humanity for all times to come. And you read the Quran for the purpose of being guided, and in comes right at the beginning of the text a message which is telling us that the creatures, the beings that are meant to serve the Almighty, وَيَفْعَلُونَ مَا يُؤْمَرُونَ, and they do what they have been asked. They are asked always. They too, when they were informed about a project that the Almighty was about to undertake, they asked serious questions. Why did they ask those questions? Well, there was something in the nature of that project that they knew. Probably we do not know the details that the Almighty mentioned to them, because it is in the style of the presentation of the Quran that there are very few words mentioned to describe a reality. Words only meant necessary for the description to make sense and to let people imagine the details themselves. But whatever be the case, the angels would see that here is going to be somebody who is going to get liberty, independence, could choose anything, good or bad. They will be given the freedom to even go against God. And, they expressed their surprise, their feelings freely. And they said, are you going to create herein those who are going to create mischief? Let's face it, they were not wrong. They were not wrong. And they will shed the blood of each other. But the Almighty said, I know what you don't know. He didn't say, how dare you ask this question? Who are you? I mean, who asked you to raise those questions? We didn't say that. Instead, what he said was, Inni alamu ma la ta'lamun. I know what you don't know. And then he went ahead to offer an explanation to the angels, which when they saw and heard, they said, okay, we got it. We know now that you know everything and we know nothing. What was the explanation? I obviously this is not right now the subject that I'm expected to go into the details of which, but let me tell you briefly what the Almighty did. And let me tell you before that, why did the angels have those apprehensions? They had those apprehensions because they could see that there is somebody who is going to be created with freedom, complete freedom. And that freedom is going to be misused. The response of the Almighty is saying, as if, I got your point. You're not completely wrong. But you have only looked at one part of the picture. What you are imagining is, and I don't blame you, what you're imagining is that having created man and given him freedom, that freedom is going to be misused. Fine. But did you not look at the other side of the picture? There are going to be humans from within that species who are going to employ their freedom positively. They're not going to misuse it. They're going to use it positively. And that is what they were introduced to. There were names of some outstanding performers amongst humans that were introduced to the angels, and they said, oh God, you are the one who knows everything and we know nothing. So the idea was that the Almighty wanted to create a being who would be independent, and God would expect from that independent being to do what is right and to refrain from doing what is wrong, despite the fact that what is going to be wrong is going to be immensely attractive and and causing problems for humans. And what is going to be right is going to be tested, at times asking for sacrifice. So that is what caused the angels to not feel comfortable with the idea. And then the Almighty explained. What I'm trying to say is that by mentioning this story right at the beginning of the Quran, the Almighty is actually telling us that all those creatures of the Almighty who are intelligent, who have a thinking mind, who have questions, are going to only get involved properly in any project, more particularly the projects of the Almighty, when the individual is going to understand what is the real reason, rationale, the spirit behind the idea. Because how on earth are you going to be interested in doing something which you don't even understand? By just being an obedient servant. Okay, I'll do it for 1 or 2 days, but it's very boring. I don't understand, how can I do it? So it's a very good example of why the Almighty keeps telling us, all individuals, all human beings, use your understand. And when you will understand, you will be motivated. If you will not understand, you will go to one of the two extremes. Either you will become negative and would not accept because you've not bothered to look into the depth of what the idea was because of some reason, some vested interest, or you will be the other extreme, dull, mindless, obedient person sake of it, going through the motions, boring, causing others also to be drawn away from the real essence of the message. So God wants his servants to use what he has given them more than anything else. What has caused him to be distinguished from other creatures and to be humans, and that is the intellect. So that is one example of where the Quran you find is actually urging the reader to use intellect as much as possible. The other passage or two verses are absolutely directly urging. Afala yatadabbaruna al-Quran. Do they not ponder, reflect over the Quran? Walau kana min indi ghayri Allah. Had it been from anyone other than God, la wajadu fihi ikhtilafan kathira, they would have found in it a lot of discrepancies. The background of this verse is that there were some hypocrites, some weak-minded Muslims, weak in faith, who seemed to be not quite interested in the message of God and were on the verge of cooperating with the enemies. It was as if even though they had acknowledged that they were believers, yet they were not convinced. So you know what God is saying? Why are you not convinced? What is the problem? Have you not pondered over the Quran? It really seems that you have a problem in accepting, acknowledging our messenger as his representative. You have doubts about it. So have you not pondered over the Quran? Had you done it, you would have found that there is no discrepancy, there are no contradictions. And that would have led you to believe that it's from God. And that this man is God's representative. And you would not have behaved the way you were behaving. So the Quran, what I'm saying is, the Quran is actually requiring the reader to use his intellect and to ponder and reflect over the Quran, to read it critically, to reach the conclusion that it's from God. Because had it not been from God, you would have found that it's contradictory. It says one thing in one passage, and it says quite another thing in another passage. But if you, having carefully read it, you start concluding that it's absolutely consistent. It just simply cannot be a human's work, and therefore you would have come to the conclusion that it's God who has read this man, it's God's messenger, and I've done it, sir. No matter whatever you ask me to do, I'll do it. So what the Quran is doing is, and I'll keep saying it if you will keep coming to these sessions. I'll keep repeating that the Quran makes sure that if there is somebody who wants to believe, the belief should be based on intellect, on reflection, on pondering, on understanding, on question. The same verse, and I on the basis of this verse, I say to everybody that no matter whoever you are, whether a scholar or non-scholar, there is one overriding principle of tafsir which simply cannot be known, which is that please explain the verses of the Quran in a manner that the Quran does not appear to be contradicting itself. If there is an explanation, interpretation of the Quran which leads you to believe that the Quran is contradictory, just throw it out, because it cannot be contradictory. I'm not saying to be rude, just don't throw it out. I'll ask, sir, please, I don't understand. That verse is saying something else, and what you're saying right now seems to be completely the otherwise. So, that's one verse. The other verse is again the same wordings in Surah Muhammad, verse 24. It says, Afala yatadabbaruna al-Quran. Do they not ponder over the Quran? Am ala qulubin aqfaluha. What is it that their hearts have been locked? Well, again, the same interesting point. They're not pondering, but what is locked is heart. Probably the idea is that your hearts are locked, and therefore your hearts are not allowing your mind to go there. Because sometimes it could happen that you say that.
Chip is not working.
It's not working, chip is not working.
The chip failed.
That's right. So, it's not, you're right, it's not working. So,
The motherboard is working, but the processor.
absolutely, it's on intent and yet it's not working. Something similar to what happened to my laptop this morning.
Also, one quick question.
Yeah.
You use the word that we need to use our intellect to control our economic infrastructure. Now, once you have the firm belief in that this is the true word of God, that is the true decision, and you keep pondering on ayahs to actually fulfill or that belief. Therefore, once you have a belief, then you only ponder the Quran to understand the ayahs and not to just form your belief over time.
There are two things. One thing I didn't want to say, but I have to say now. Now, what do you mean by full belief? What do you mean? I mean 100%. I'm saying Iman, belief is the translation of Iman. Now, when you say I believe, what it means is actually 80%, 85%, 90%. What do you mean by 100%? I mean, who is there who would say that? Secondly, and this is my personal understanding, you might delete it from there. Second thing is, that when you will have 100% belief, you would say that now because I am 100% certain, Alhamdulillah, thank you very much God, I don't need to read the Quran. And you will have a photo session and you will put it on your Facebook. Complete believer, 100% certain, no reading of the Quran at all. What do you mean? When you will read the Quran again the Quran is going to cause you to think, oh goodness me, yesterday I thought this verse is saying this thing, but the next verse is saying something else. I can assure you that each journey of the Quran that you will undertake will give you new meanings because it challenges you, man. I mean, it just challenges your intellect. It challenges your earlier beliefs. And that is why I simply don't understand how on earth there could be sects within Islam wherein each person belonging to a sect so very diligently sticks to its understanding of that sect. 100%. Goodness me. This is like I tell you, this is absolutely impossible.
This is not my question. My question
But let me make use of the question to score more points.
My question was that will we use the intellect to accept the God word?
Yes, that's what God is saying. Yes, that's what God is saying. But having had confidence that I am reading the Quran critically, and the more I am reading it, the more I am getting convinced gradually that it's making a lot of sense, which is what I think belief is. This journey you would never want to stop because that is what is giving you satisfaction. That is what is giving you confidence. So you will read and you will see what the verse is saying and you will read it honestly. At times it so happens that people say that we are believers and we will not think. And in other words, what they're saying that we are believers and therefore from now onwards we will be a little dishonest because of our belief. Because we will not think. We will not allow new ideas to come. Because these new ideas are misleading. So how can you do it? The Quran keeps telling you, use your intellect. Think about it. Reflect. So what I'm saying is that either you will stop reading the Quran, then obviously you will not think. But if you will continue reading the Quran with an open mind, the Quran is not going to allow you to not think.
But the person is still there. The faith, see, we got the Quran is as a whole hand. But what about the people who are the prophet of the time? The Quran was getting revealed over so many years. So what they're saying that, alright, today we believe, we got so many ayahs, and after a month we're getting more ayahs, we first will ponder on it and get our intellect to certify those ayahs, and then we will continue our journey in answer.
No, but that's not what I'm saying. What they would do is that a certain part of the Quran has already been revealed and they have faith in it, by which what I mean is that they have confidence, which let's not quantify it, but I am certain that for many of the people you can't say it's 100%. It's a predominant confidence, understanding that it's right, it's from God. There is a window that is always open which keeps making you critically examine. When new verses would reveal, because you have that confidence, and this confidence is, by the way, an honest confidence. If it's a bias, it's a justifiable bias, right? Now, because you have a belief and yet you are encouraged by your belief to be critical, that is what makes your belief, your confidence honest, real, genuine, intellectually sound. There is one confidence which is just emotional in nature. It's hollow. It stops you from entertaining new questions. It asks you to run away from people who are criticizing your message, your religion. The Quran, I'm absolutely certain, is not requiring you to do that. So when you will read the Quran over and over again after having believed, and there is something that you would come across that says what is completely different from what you had been understanding before, I'm sure you will be shattered. You will say, oh God, this I don't understand. What's the answer? So your faith is going to be challenged, right? But if you are honest and you will probe, you will find out that my question, doubt, apprehension was wrong, misplaced. I got the answer. And this time around, your confidence is going to be even greater. This is the process that we are expected to undertake. Each journey has its challenges of reading the Quran. You have questions. Those questions do not mean that you are doubting. What it means is that you are critically examining what the text itself is saying, which is in turn enabling you to enhance your belief. But I have to complete my lecture. The third positive mention in the Quran is, have you ever heard it? Have you heard this verse? Surah Al-Faf verse 22 says, Inna sharrat dawab indallah. The worst beasts in the eyes of God as-summun bukmun lazina la yaqilun, are those who are deaf and dumb, those who don't use their intellect. It's very strong. You know, God has created humans and given them intellect for them to use it, and they stop using it. God says that such humans are the worst beasts. Beasts have not been given this ability, so they're not expected to employ it. But those who have been given this ability are not making use of it, are deaf, which really means that they were given ears with which to hear things that were sound, correct, convincing, and they refused to hear the truth. So their ability to hear is useless from the point of view of the Almighty. It's just worthless. They are virtually deaf. They were given this tongue to speak the truth, to tell others what is right. And they're making use of it to speak what is wrong, what is false. They are dumb. Because the reason why they were given this ability is not being properly justified. So the Almighty is saying that these are the people who are deaf and dumb, and they are not using their intellect. So I think I can't imagine that there could be more forceful presentation in favor of use of intellect. You know, that if you're not using it, the Almighty has this message for all such people. And if you have heard it before, I'm pretty confident that you must not have heard this one. Look at this reference. How easy to remember. 10:100. Surah number 10 and verse 100. The 100th verse of Surah Yunus. Quite often we read Quranic verses and we don't realize the depth of the message that it's carrying. And that is precisely why the Almighty urges that we keep reading the book over and over. Because it's simply not possible that you say that I've done it 50 times and now it's all over. No, each time you do it, you'll find that there's some more treasures that were hidden that you had never ever come across before. This verse is saying, no individual can believe without God's leave. Ma kana li nafsin an tu'mina illa bi'iznillah. No individual can believe without God's leave. permission, sanction. وَيَجْعَلُ الرِّجْسَ عَلَى الَّذِينَ لَا يَعْقِلُونَ. He casts filth over those people who don't use their intellect. Now let's look at it in the reverse order. People who do not use their intellect, the Almighty decides that they're going to be covered by filth. Obviously not the physical filth, the moral, intellectual filth. They will be after their desires. They will hate other people, carry grudges. They will be jealous of some people. They will be biased and so on, not interested in others, what others say. So this is the filth that the Almighty is talking about. It will be cast over people who don't use their intellect. And these are the people about whom the Almighty has decided that He will not allow them the facility, the all-important gift of faith. And obviously, this faith is not the one that all of us got from our hospitals, where we were born. This is not that faith. This is real faith that really matters. The faith that the Almighty is going to count as important, as weighty on the Day of Judgment, is the faith that He gives as a gift to the people who use their intellect. So He says, no person, no individual can ever have faith except by the Almighty's decision. How easily we say that the 20-25% of the world population who were born Muslim, alhamdulillah, faithful. All others are doomed. Alhamdulillah. What do you mean? What do you mean? The Almighty is actually giving His policy statement that He gives faith, and He has a very clear criterion. Those who use their intellect. Now, obviously what it means is that they go through the process that I mentioned, and they do it honestly. Those are the people who, when they will make it a point that it's a part of their habit, it's a part of their normal routine, that they use their intellect. They will not hate you for any reason. There are so many good arguments supporting the fact that the other person who is different from you and who probably is your competitor is not worthy of your hatred. You don't have to be jealous of others and so on. You should not go after your base desires. I mean, if you are using your intellect, all these good things will come to your mind and there will be no filth around you. And God says that that is going to be the case and He's going to decide that He gives faith. So, the Quran, I can, tell you verses after verses. There are 50 passages, more than that, which mention the fact that the Almighty is requiring the reader, the believer, to use his intellect to think, to ponder, to reflect. I mean, the two famous verses, one in Surah Al-Baqarah and one in Al-Imran, says, إِنَّ فِي خَلْقِ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَاخْتِلَافِ اللَّيْلِ وَالنَّهَارِ وَالْفُلْكِ الَّتِي تَجْرِي فِي الْبَحْرِ. It's a longish verse. And he said, لَا يَأْتِي لِقَوْمٍ يَعْقِلُونَ. In all these phenomena of the nature, there are signs for those who use their intellect. The same thing the Almighty mentioned, next verse, Surah Al-Imran, إِنَّ فِي خَلْقِ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَاخْتِلَافِ اللَّيْلِ وَالنَّهَارِ لَا يَأْتِي لِأُولِي الْأَلْبَابِ. That those, indeed, in the creation of the heavens and the earth, and in the alternating days and nights, there are signs for people who reflect and ponder, men of understanding. So I mean, a reader of the Quran cannot escape the reality that God Almighty, the one who revealed this book, is actually making it absolutely clear and plain that as far as his religion is concerned, it is addressing your intellect. It is appealing to your intellect. It is asking you to be drawn towards his religion on the basis of your realization, which you get because you are using your intellect. God, what he's saying is right. I just mentioned earlier the verse which says that you reflect and ponder over the Quran, and the Quran says that it has no contradiction. Now, you might say that people have their own questions, people dispute our claim. But let them. It's not my problem. I don't need to convince people. I don't have to make speeches to draw the attention of the humanity towards my speech, which after all is going to be designed by me and spoken by me. I have so many problems in my presentation, and maybe I exaggerate. All that I've got to do, every Muslim has got to do is to make God's message available to everybody. Don't try to add to it anything. Do not take away anything. Don't be apologetic. Answer the questions as best as you can. Understand the Quran as much as you can. And that's the only thing that we're supposed to be doing. And the Quran would do its own task. That is why the Quran requires the Prophet, may God bless him, to deliver his message through the Quran. فَذَكِّرْ بِالْقُرْآنِ مَنْ يَخَافُ. You remind through the Quran all those people who are conscious of the fact that they're going to return to us, return to me. So this is it. Just a mention of a hadith which says clearly, because there was a problem in my laptop, I couldn't mention the reference, but I'll give it later. The Prophet, may God bless him, is reported to mention, and this is available in more than one hadith, and as well as the fact that it's absolutely in accordance with what the Quran says. Rufal qalam an thalath. The pen has been lifted in the case of 3 individuals. In other words, what it means is there are 3 types of people who are not accountable to the Almighty for what they do. A child, until such time that he or she reaches the age of majority. A person who has gone unconscious or is asleep, so long as is not conscious, is not accountable. And a person who is lunatic until such time that he gains sanity and is able to think. Obviously, all these 3 cases are the cases of the people who may otherwise be probably healthier than some of us, but the only thing that is missing in them is the ability to think and to conclude on the basis of their intellect. So, the Prophet said, and this is exactly in accordance with the Quranic message, that this is because they don't have intellect. Their intellect is not good enough for them to be able to make decisions for which they could be held accountable. So, for them, the pen has been lifted. In other words, their deeds are not going to be scrutinized with a view to holding them responsible for their consequences. So these were some of the positive mentions in the Quran about the use of intellect. And now I have here exactly half an hour for question answer session.
So regarding this, those children who died before they reached the age of